they were looking for a couple of guys to do work on concrete curbs. And so we stopped by a place one time. We tracked down who it was. Anyway, we didn't get hired. So we don't know for sure that they were really looking, or maybe they'd gotten somebody, or it's pretty hard to get a job in a foreign country if you don't have a work permit, and you kind of got to go in there with that idea. So that didn't work out. And then another time, when we were in Darwin, we heard that they were looking for a couple of guys to go out and work on an oil rig, like out in the ocean. And so we went and applied, you know, and didn't get the job. My hair was starting to get a little long, you know, maybe halfway over the ears. If I didn't have a headband on, I could tuck it in behind there, but it was like maybe half down the ears. And Australia was kind of a cowboy, redneck kind of place, so they might not have liked anybody with long hair there. So anyway, didn't get that job, and so they did have a port there in a harbor where ships would come in. And so one night, Bill and I were walking around, and we kind of came upon this bar. And it was, you know, nothing special. It was almost like a warehouse type thing, concrete floor, had tables, had a bar, you know. And so, you know, we went in and we had a couple drinks or something. And in Australia, I don't know if it's an ego thing or what, but in America, you know, if they bring you any kind of drink, whether it's water or whatever, you know, they'll pick up the empty glass and take it away and then give you another one. Well, in Australia, they don't do that. When you get a drink, they bring you the drink, and then they'll leave that empty glass there, and they'll bring you another drink. And so it's kind of a thing of, you know, if you got a table full of glasses, then you've had quite a few drinks. Well, a couple of sailors that had gotten off a boat joined us, and we were talking to them. And so there was 4 or 5 people sitting around this table. And so, you know, each round that came, you know, this table was maybe 3 feet in diameter, something like that. It wasn't real big, 3 feet in diameter. And so, you know, by the end of the night, this whole thing was full of glasses. Well, the sailors were getting pretty drunk. They had gotten leave off the ship for a night or something, and so they were getting pretty looped. And so we ordered another round or something, or somebody had, and they kind of were cutting them off at the bar. And so this one guy, one of the sailors, he got mad about it, and he took his arm and he went across that table with all those glasses right onto the concrete floor. They all broke. It was a big scene. So Bill and I are like, okay, we need to get out of here. So we went up to the bar, and Bill's talking to the guy and says, hey, I know we got another round coming, but you know, these guys are getting out of hand, so we're like out of here. And so the bartender was pretty nice. He said, well, we don't have a problem with you two, but we need to get those 2 other guys out of here. It's like, yeah, we agree. So I'm thinking probably some bouncers came along and kind of bounced those guys out of there. So that was kind of one of those crazy stories. And so another thing they had up in Darwin was they had these ant hills. You know, in America we have ant farms. You know, the ant colony is like down in the ground. Well, in Australia they're up out of the ground, and these things will be anywhere from 2 to 3 to 4 feet high. This big around mud up like this, up out of the ground, and they're just like hundreds of them out there. And so that was interesting. You know, hadn't seen that. And so when we were in Sydney, we had bought a ticket, an airfare ticket from Darwin to Singapore, and from Singapore to Calcutta, India. And so when we were staying in this place where the people lived, and we had a room upstairs, and they had these louvers in there. And so I had a traveler's check, and so I was trying to get, we were leaving like, I think we were leaving like the next day or something from the airport, and we were asked, we owed these people some money, and so we asked if they would cash a traveler's check, and they wouldn't do it, and the banks were closed. And so Bill and I got kind of mad about it, and so what we ended up doing was, we, about 2 to 3 hours before we were going to leave on the airport, we went right by them, right by the office, into our room on the 2nd floor. Well, we unscrewed the louvers that were, like 2 feet square on the, I think it was 2nd floor. And we unscrewed those louvers, and then Bill went out by them and went around to the back of the building, and I threw all our stuff out these louvers, and then I crawled out the louver and put the louver back up, and we dropped down to the ground and ended up just splitting, so we didn't pay them. Probably not the best thing in the world, but we were ticked off that they wouldn't help us out with the traveler's checks, and so we just stiffed them for the whole time we were there. And so we get to the airport, and we're flying BOAC, which is British something, and I don't think they're in business anymore. The big planes then that were making the big flights were 707s, 4-engine jets. And so we end up flying to Singapore. And Singapore was interesting. We kind of heard that, they didn't let people with long hair into the country. And so I had my hair tucked back behind my ears with a band on, it wasn't that long. And so anyway, we got up to we're checking into the country to get a visa, and we were only going to be there like 3 days. And so she stamps my visa thing in there, and then she looks up at me, and she's like, well, you can't come into the country. And she literally took a pen, I still got it in my passport, and she X'd out the visa to come into the country for 3 days. She goes, you can't come into the country. And so I didn't, they're kind of speaking English and they're not, and it was hard to understand them, and so I wasn't sure why, and if I'd have really understood that it was my hair, I'd have just gone down, and got a haircut, gone to the barbershop and got a haircut. It wasn't a big deal. But anyway, we threw a fit. Americans, we throw a fit about everything. We don't want to seem to go along with anybody's rules. It seemed like that they weren't going to let us in the country, and it was at night. And so I also remember a group of people, and I don't know where they came in from, but this one guy was sick as a rag doll. And that's the first time I'd ever seen anybody that sick from traveling. Food, water, that kind of stuff. I don't know where they came from, but he was laying down like a rag doll on the airport floor. And they were checking into a hotel, and the people he was traveling with literally picked this guy up and just tossed him in the back of the van. And he just laid there like he was dead. Little did we know we were going to experience that. So we ranted and raved and ranted and raved and made a big stink about it. And finally, they let us in the country. And they checked us into a hotel. This is pretty radical. They checked us into a hotel, and they kept our passports, which is pretty spooky. Your passport is, it's like you don't go anywhere without that passport on you. And so we got into this hotel, which seemed pretty modern on the inside, but I took pictures of the outside, and they were like remodeling it, and they had like bamboo scaffolding up 3-4 floors on the outside of this thing. So Singapore was really the first place we'd gotten where it was half Eastern and half Western. Okay, and so you could get American quality stuff there for the most part, but you also had this Eastern stuff that you had to be careful of what you're eating. And so ended up buying a little camera there because it was a duty-free port, and and I had a suit made. It was a waistline black suit, almost looked like a tuxedo. When I was there, and must have shipped it home. And so we ended up, one of the things that, because you're an American, you stick out like a sore thumb as a tourist, there's people always wanting to like show you around and stuff. Like you'd hire them for a couple of days and they'd take you around to places and stuff like that. So we ran into this guy, I don't know where we met him, probably outside the hotel or something, and so he took us around, to like the government buildings and then the street, in the Singapore, and I think at that time Singapore was the 3rd or 4th largest harbor in the world, so there was a tremendous amount of shipping and goods and all that stuff going on. And so he took us up to these like botanical gardens that we'd never seen before, very Eastern. It's the first time. They had like the plants looked like animals, like elephants and all kinds of different animals, and this place was really big, and we saw people dancing, and Tai Chi and kind of stuff like that, and of course we'd never seen that before. So all new to us. Now people have seen it on TV and stuff like that, and so it's kind of a ritual thing they go through, or a form of exercise, or whatever they're doing. But it was new to us back then. And I remember one time we were sitting on a hill, this grassy hill, and just kind of resting, and this truck pulled up, had nothing to do with us, and the motor just blew up, and the whole thing just went boom, and all the oil came out on the ground and parts, and I mean, it was just like the bottom of this engine just blew up, and the parts all fell on the street. It's like a delivery truck or something. So anyway, that was kind of interesting. Bill bought a couple of rings. What we found out, we didn't know, but and somebody was doing it back then. We don't know who, but if you brought opals from Australia to Singapore, you could double your money. So a $40 opal in Singapore, in Australia, would be $80 to $100 in Singapore. So I imagine there were people that were probably smuggling opals and stuff out of Australia with that flight from Darwin to Singapore. But Bill had bought a couple rings in Singapore, and one of them, at least one of them, got stolen out of our room at the hotel because he had it right there. I mean, it was like, you know, and we reported it, but you know, nothing going on there. You don't know all what's going on, but anyway, definitely got stolen out of the room. So he's pretty disappointed about that. And so we just kind of, for the next 3 days, we kind of went around Singapore and looked around, and then that third day we were supposed to leave on a flight. They had us. When they took our passports, they booked the flight from Singapore to Calcutta and a time and all that kind of stuff. And so we end up showing up at the airport, and we check in for our flight. Of course, back then they didn't have any TSA or any kind of security, I don't think, at all. And sure enough, we're walking in this line, like to go into the place where the passengers are for that flight, and this guy comes out and he hands us our passports back. So that was pretty nuts. So we ended up flying from Singapore to Camp Lepar or something like that, not too far away in Malaysia. And we just kind of were making a stop there before we took off for Calcutta. So, you know, I got off the plane, walked around the airport, and got back on there. It wasn't any big deal. I just thought, well, I'm here, you know. It's at night. And so we end up getting into Calcutta about 12:30 at night, dark. Had no idea what we were getting into. And so there weren't very many people on this plane. 707 seemed like they're, you know, 707 I think had like 2 rows of 3s with the aisle down the middle. And it seemed like, you know, there was maybe 20 people on this plane. So I was sitting there, 3 seats by myself. Bill was sitting there, you know, people, stuff like that. So they served a dinner, and so, you know, the trays down, you know, a tray, cafeteria type thing, you know, with a plate and knife and fork. And so they had not picked up the dinner plates and trays when we came into land. And so we come into land, and the plane ends up bottoming out their shocks like 3 different times and going back up in the air. And by the second one, these trays and silverware were flying everywhere, up and hitting the ceiling and flying around. And it was like, whoa, this is crazy. And about the third one, I'm thinking, you know, went through my mind, like, are we running out of runway here? I mean, he's probably doing 160 miles an hour. He's tried to land this thing 3 times. We must have chewed up a lot of the runway by now. But anyway, got it down. And so we get out at the airport, and we run into a guy, tourist, probably an American or somebody from Europe. Anyway, you just spot people that are green. You know, we just got, you know, we're clean and just got off the plane. And he comes up to us. He goes, 2 things you don't want to do here: drink the water and go on a 3rd class train. Don't go on a 3rd class train. Okay. So anyway, I'm going to take a little break right now because we're getting into India and we're in Calcutta, and that starts a whole nother story. So, good enough.